everyone. So today we are going to talk about the Narnia by C.S. Lewis. So the Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So before that, I'm going to tell you about its history. So it's about the modern period. So modern period has been a period of significant development in the fields of science, politics, warfare, and technology. It has also been an age of discovery and globalization. So during this time, the European powers, later on with their colonies, began in political, economic, and cultural colonization in the rest of the world. So by the late 19th century and 20th century, the modern art and the politics and science and culture has become dominant not only in the Western Europe but also in the Northern America. So, but almost every civilized area of the globe, including the movements thought of the opposed to the West and then globalization. So, the modern era is closely associated with the development of individualism, capitalism, and urbanization. So, the brutal wars and the other problems of this era, many of which come from the effects of rapid changes and the connection loss of the strength of traditional religious and ethical norms. So, the development of this era is due to the problem of the past era. So, it is a result of the past era. So, let's go to the author. So, let's know who is C.S. Lewis. So, C.S. Lewis was Clive Staples Lewis was born on November 29, 1898 in Belfast, Ireland. So, he died on November 22, 1963. So, before anything else, he was known as the intellectual giants of the 12th century and one of the most influential writer of his day. So, C.S. Lewis is a one-of-a-kind author. So, he is a student of Oxford University and became a professor in that university. So, he was anonymously elected to the chair of medieval and Renaissance literature at Cambridge University, a position he held until his retirement. So, he wrote more than 30 books, and allowing him to reach a vast audience, and his works continue to attract thousands of new readers almost a day. So, his most distinguished and popular accomplishments include The Mere Christianity, Out of the Silent Planet, The Great Divorce, The Screwtape Letters, and the most known novel that he wrote is The Chronicles of Narnia, and one of it is the Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And let's know more about C.S. Lewis. So, C.S. Lewis was born and raised Protestant. So, he is a Christian, but his faith gradually became less tangible to him as the years progressed. It is unclear when he crossed the line from lackadaisical believer and agnostic, and still harder to know when he went to agnostic to atheist. So, C.S. Lewis went into a process. He became also an atheist, but later on, by the time he began to attend University of College in Oxford, Lewis was a non-believer. So you see, from a family which is Protestant, he became an atheist. And then when he entered Oxford University, then there dissuade him in writing his book because it will hurt his reputation as a serious writer. So, in particular, Tolkien criticized Lewis' books, the first book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because he thought that there were too many elements that clashed. Father Christmas, an evil witch, talking animals, and the children. Thankfully, Lewis didn't listen to their criticization. So he, following his own will, he published The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in 1950. So Lewis quickly made another parts, 6 more Narnia books. So publishing the first one and the final one, the Last Battle in 1956. Although they were not well received at first by critics and reviewers, the book gained popularity through word of mouth. So in this time, Narnia books have since sold more than 100 million copies and are among the most beloved books of the classic children's literature. So even though Lewis received some bad critics from some critics, Lewis now is happy knowing that the book that he made is a big and have a great impact to other people.
After the discussion of the history of C.S. Lewis, now I will proceed to the discussion of the connection between the history of C.S. Lewis and the novel itself. And moreover, I will discuss to you the allegorical connection between the Bible and the novel. So, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So C.S. Lewis was already a well-known literary critic and religious writer by the time he embarked on what has become his best-loved project, The Chronicles of Narnia. And the first in the series is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, was published in 1951. So to much acclaim and gave Lewis the opportunity to present issues of faith, logic, as well as the strong moral and ethical messages against a mythological landscape that includes well-known elements including fauns, giants, witches, and Father Christmas. So during the World War II, Lewis, like the professor in the story, opened his home to children evacuated from London during the air raids. This experience sowed the first seeds of the story as Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy come to stay at the professor's home for the summer term. And additionally, Lewis took images that particularly struck imagination, such as a fawn carrying an umbrella and a queen on a sledge, and then knit them into his story. He was particularly attracted to the fairy tale form because he had found new depth in it as an adult, especially admiring its restraint at avoiding unnecessary discussion, and he appreciated the weight of each word and detail, and found that the form helped him to distill the tale of Narnia. So, The Land of Narnia presents readers with an alternate universe, one with a timeline quite different from our own, and the wardrobe is one of the locations that serves as the bridge between the two worlds. Lewis uses the wardrobe to symbolize the coming of the age of his character. When they move past the boundaries of Narnia, they awaken an awareness of the difference between good and evil, and the children's experiences in Narnia present an alternate method for communicating strong moral teachings about courage, honesty, kindness, reconciliation, forgiveness, and friendship. The touch of the enchantment and wonder in the tale has also contributed to the popularity of, and indeed, the fascination with the Narnia stories. So, the question of what Lewis thought he was doing is not quite the same question as what prompted him to write. And according to A.N. Wilson, in his brilliant and continuous study of 1990, have made much of the fact that Lewis began work on The Lion at a time in his life when multiple stresses, personal matters didn't have to be settled by constant conflict. He had been much taken aback by a rather dramatic debate in Oxford with the formidable philosopher Elizabeth Anscombe, who had severely trounced him in an argument exposing major flaws in his book on miracles. So, as we can see that Narnia is based on the life of C.S. Lewis, in which he experienced tragic flaws.
Temptation is present in both the Bible and the Narnia Chronicles. For example, Lewis used the biblical theme of temptation, the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe, uses New Testament readings as its primary source, drawing from the stories of temptation of both Jesus and Judas. So, the description of his wilderness, for example, Edwin, the description of his wilderness and decadent behavior is very clear. At first, Edmund tried to remember that it was rude to speak with one's mouth full, but soon he forgot about this and thought only of trying to shovel down as much Turkish delight as he could. And the more he ate, the more he wanted to eat. So it also can be seen in the passage, I think I would like to make you the prince someday when you bring others to visit me. Next is the devil took him to a very high mountain, and it is allegorical to the Bible when the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you. You can visualize that Edmund is equivalent to Judas, because Edmund embodies many characteristics of Judas, including the characteristic of betrayal, and Aslan's similarity to Jesus is noticeable in the way he forgives Edmund. So the white witch is equivalent to the devil, because the white witch parallels the devil in many places in this book. She is the rightful ruler of Narnia, and though Aslan is the one who created it, this is quite similar to how the devil is both the prince of our world.
Although it was the sixth book to be written in the seven-book series, the story of the magician's nephew takes place several decades before The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and it describes the creation of the land of Narnia and how humans came to be associated with the other world. The narrative draws heavily from the creation story in Genesis, but Lewis' account of Narnian creation is clearly geared to appeal to a younger audience. However, this report will dwell only in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So the analysis of evil entering Narnia would not be near complete, of course, without examining the character of Queen Jadis, known as the White Witch. Like Uncle Andrew, the witch is antagonistic towards Aslan, and she too wishes to destroy the lion and attempts to kill him in an iron bar. When it says that she raised her arm and flung the iron bar straight at its head. There is an evil witch abroad in Manu, and later Aslan makes it clear that she is the evil that has entered the Narnia. The world is not 5 hours old, and evil has already entered it. There is an evil witch abroad in Manu land. So perhaps the best example of surrendering to temptation of the Chronicles is the character of Edmund, in which Edmund is tempted throughout his time in the Narnia. So in John 14:30, another similarity between the two in this book is the fact that they only treat a person nicely so that they do what they want them to do. The witch only was nice to Edmund to get him to bring his siblings to Narnia, and after this, she treated him no better than a slave. The devil is the same. He appears to be good in the outside, but really he is only deceiving you so he can get a hold of you. It can be seen on 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. So Aslan is equivalent to God. So in this book, Aslan is parallel to God, especially God the Son in many ways. The most striking example is that of Aslan dying in the stead of Edmund, and he gave his life for Edmund so that he could live. After his death, though he rose from the dead, this is very similar to how Jesus died for our sins and afterwards rising from the dead. So that would be all for the connection between the history, series, and the novel.
As a continuation to my co-reporter's analysis, I am going to talk about the book itself closely, and we call it the Analysis B. The one presented earlier was Analysis A by Ms. Lorejels, and now reporting is yours truly, Ms. Dianne Arat. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a classic children's fantasy novel published in 1950 by the English author C.S. Lewis. It portrays the lives and magical adventures of the four young siblings, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, during the World War II. And my argument would state that for them, visiting Narnia takes the form of a psychological journey that represents the realization of their repressed desires. It is through this realization that they develop as a character. The adventures in Narnia can be seen from both an external and internal point of view. Parallel with the struggles against evil forces, there is also a struggle concerning inner, personal conflicts. So according to Rigsby, Narnia is not simply an unreal fantasy land created to entertain children. It is a meaningful visualization of the inner landscape of the psyche, where the internal conflicts that lead to personality growth are acted out. So Narnia is more than a magical adventure. It also represents a psychological journey during which hidden emotions and desires are released and acted out. So at the end of the novel, the Pevensey siblings would have a what we call moral character transformation. So to start, I would like to discuss to you first why is it called psychological journey. So it was through this magical wardrobe, which symbolizes for a magical passageway, that when they crossed it, their psychological journey had started. So as stated in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on pages 13 and 14, it was almost completely dark in there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her, pushing the soft folds of the coats aside. What was rubbing against her face and hands was no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. Then she saw that there was a light ahead of her. So the transition to the new world is apparent in the words dark and soft, which contrast with hard, rough, prickly, and light that characterize the entrance to Narnia. The physical change from soft coats to rough branches represents the emergence into a new world, but it also symbolizes the start of their psychological journey, because they left the comforting enclosure of the wardrobe that represents the old, familiar world and enters the world of the unknown. So the wardrobe is, as a passageway, symbolizes the transition from the consciousness to the unconsciousness. So traveling through the wardrobe can be compared with a rebirth, a passage from one condition in England to a more vital one in Narnia. The adventures in Narnia are vital components in their developmental process, because during this quest they are able to act out their hidden desires and emotions and transforms into a better character. So, let's start with the one who got in first in the wardrobe and to the world of Narnia. Lucy Pevensey, also called as Lucy the Shy and the Fearful at first, but then was called Queen Lucy the Valiant in the end. So Lucy is at the beginning of the novel a very shy and fearful character, as seen in the first meeting with the professor. The professor's odd-looking appearance in page 91 and his shaggy white hair that grows over his head and face on page 9 frightens Lucy, who seems to be a very sensitive person. Another example of her frightening behavior is seen when the children are in the girls' room and talk about their new home. What's that noise? The thought of all those long passages leading into empty rooms was beginning to make her feel a little creepy, according to the pages 10 and 11. So, the house's long passages and empty rooms frighten Lucy, who starts to feel a little creepy over the large house and the new situation far away from home. One reason for why she is this sensitive, shy, and fearful girl at the beginning is explained in her background. Lucy and her siblings are removed from home because of air raids over London, and consequently, the children are left on their own without their parents. So the lack of parents means that the children have to manage the new situation on their own. So the new life with the new strange people is a huge contrast for Lucy, who is the youngest compared with her previous urban life. So the wardrobe's function here is given justice by Lucy's first meeting with Mr. Tumnus the Fawn. So when Lucy first meets Mr. Tumnus, she is not afraid of him or even shy. Instead, she greets him with "Good morning" on page 17 and seems to be comfortable in his company despite the fact that Mr. Tumnus is a fantasy creature. So, in comparing to the first meeting with professors, a clear change has taken place in her character. So instead of being shy and fearful, she is open and confident, which is an evidence of the wardrobe's function as a psychological passageway discussed above. So in this meeting, Lucy starts developing her self-confidence, which is also seen in the following description that Lucy found herself walking through the wood arm in arm with this strange creature as if they had known one another all their lives. That was in page 19. So the fact that she walks with this strange creature, a creature that is both a stranger and a non-human being, demonstrates that she starts to open up herself, that she becomes less restricted around other people. So the moment she transforms from Lucy Pevensey to Lucy the Valiant, because she becomes empowered to act with courage and power, was in page 193 to 194 that states, "Her hands trembled, but she managed it in the end, and for the next half hour they were busy, she attending to the wounded." So the fact that her hands tremble indicates that she is still unsure about her ability, but she handles it in the end and saves her brother and the other wounded because of her faith in herself. So Lucy's story is one of growth from fear to courage, so that she, enduring her reign, becomes known as Lucy the Valiant. So it is clear that Lucy has an important role as a healer who saves the wounded from certain death. Because of this role, she fulfills her developmental process mentioned above, since she is now powerful and confident enough to be able to completely transform into this new self. And lastly, on page 201, she states, "We should be ashamed if, for any fearing or foreboding, we turn back from following so noble a beast as now we have in chains." So Lucy thinks that it would be a shame if they stopped behind him because of fear or uncertainty that now that they are so close to their goal. This standpoint shows that Lucy has developed since her first visit to Narnia, but also that she continues to be a brave and adventurous character who expresses her thoughts and does not fear new quests. Consequently, she clearly lives up to her new name and continues to repress her frightened behavior, which leads to that she continues to act out the desire to be open, confident, and all power. So now, second to Lucy is Edmund, or known as Edmund the Jerk at first. So Edmund, younger brother to Peter and Susan, and older brother to Lucy, starts out as a real jerk. In the beginning of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Edmund talks back to Susan, defies Peter, makes fun of the kindly professor, and teases Lucy about her claim that she has traveled to another world. It's suggested that Edmund's experience at school has turned him into a bully, as stated in the text that "You've always liked being beastly to anyone smaller than you," Peter says to Edmund. We've seen that at school before now, so some of Edmund's unpleasantness also comes from his clash with Peter, and Peter admits to Aslan that his treatment of Edmund may contribute to his brother's attitude. So when Edmund finally does make it to Narnia, he is discovered by the White Witch, who plays on his greed and selfishness. So the combination of Edmund's own flaws and the witch's power makes him a traitor to his brother and sisters. The narrator is very careful to explain that Edmund is wicked but not necessarily evil, as stated in his text that you mustn't think that even now Edmund was quite so bad that he actually wanted his brother and sisters to be turned into stone. He did want Turkish delights and to be a prince and later a king, and to pay Peter out for calling him a beast. So as for what the witch would do with the others, he He didn't want her to be particularly nice to them, but he managed to believe or to pretend he believed that she wouldn't do anything very bad to them. Lying to himself, Edmund betrays his siblings to the witch, so he is now considered to be a traitor. But in this line, and Edmund for the first time in this story felt sorry for someone besides him. It is when the time he saw firsthand the animals turning into stone by the white witch's power. So Edmund's ability to feel sympathy and pity demonstrates that he could be reformed. So eventually, the witch decides to murder Edmund, but he is rescued just in time by Aslan's followers. At this point, Edmund has a long private conversation with Aslan. The narrator says that there is no need to tell you, and no one ever heard what Aslan was saying, but it was a conversation which Edmund never forgot. After this experience, Edmund changes radically. He asks his brother and sisters to forgive him, and they do. He becomes a valuable part of Aslan's army, attacking the witch when everyone else is too frightened to do so, and cleverly destroying her magic wand. So wounded in the battle, Edmund is healed by Lucy. So now he was crowned King of Narnia along with his siblings, and he becomes known as King Edmund the Just, a graver and quieter man than Peter, and great in counsel and judgment. So next to Edmund is Susan Pevensey, also known at first as Susan the grown-up wannabe. So as the oldest girl among the 4 children in Narnia, Susan often takes on a motherly role. For example, it is Susan who makes the practical suggestion that the children put on the fur coats from the wardrobe to keep them warm in the snowy landscape. Sometimes Susan's mothering is annoying to the others. So on their first night in the professor's house, Susan tries to tell Edmund that it is his bedtime, and Edmund immediately is trying to talk like mother. Who are you to say when I'm go to bed? Go to bed yourself. Although Edmund is being pretty darn rude, there's an important truth behind his criticism. In her hurry to grow up and act like a grown-up, Susan forgets that she herself is also a child. Before she experiences Narnia for herself, Susan is ready to believe that Lucy might be losing her mind, and when the professor suggests that the other worlds could really exist, she is confused because she had never dreamed that a grown-up would talk like the professor and didn't know what to think. So Susan clearly equates growing up with being practical, literal, and maybe even a little unimaginative. She's in such a hurry to become an adult that she hasn't stopped to think about more amazing possibilities that the world holds. We also know that Susan also had some fears, but not the same with Lucy. After discussion with Peter, Susan, and Edmund about what they should do, she admits, I don't want to go a step further and a wish would never come, but I think we must try to do something for Mr. Whatever his name is, I mean the fawn. We notice that Susan isn't afraid of Narnia in particular. She is afraid of the unknown in general. At the end of the book, after she has reigned as Queen Susan the Gentle for many years, Susan, along with other children, is led by the white stag to the lamppost in the woods. The other 3 want to see what lies beyond it, but Susan doesn't. By my counsel, she says, we shall lightly return to our horses and follow this white stag no further. So no matter what world Susan is in, she is nervous about crossing its boundaries. So Susan's virtues, however, are more passive than Peter's, Edmund's, or Lucy's, because while Peter is a great warrior, Edmund is a wise judge, and Lucy is brave and cheerful, Susan is simply gentle and pretty. So those are the good things to be, but she doesn't seem to be very actively good, and doesn't seem to take action herself, but to be good and practical in the background. So her title as Susan the Gentle just suits her well, especially with this line that states, a tall and gracious woman with black hair that fell almost to her feet, and the kings of the countries beyond the sea began to send ambassadors asking for her hand in marriage. So lastly, we have Peter Pevensey, the oldest of the four children who traveled to Narnia in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So as the oldest, he is the natural leader, notable for his bravery and good judgment. So Peter has high standards, which sometimes make him seem kind of self-righteous to his more flawed little brother Edmund. And also sometimes Peter can be blinded by his own self-importance, such as when he finds it difficult to believe his little sister Lucy's story about a world called Narnia, even though he knows that she never lies. Still, in general, Peter is upright and virtuous. When he learns that Mr. Thomas the Fawn has been arrested for protecting his sister Lucy, Peter immediately thinks that this is his duty to try and rescue Mr. Thomas in return. So during his stay in Narnia, Peter's bravery and leadership skills increase. When he and his sisters first meet Aslan, Peter takes the lead, speaking to Aslan first when everyone else is too overawed to say anything. Peter also takes responsibility for his failings. He admits to Aslan without being asked that his treatment of Edmund may have contributed to Edmund's betrayal. He says, "That was partly my fault, Aslan. I was angry with him and I think that helped him to go wrong." So, and in his first sword fight, Peter slays the wolf Fenris, earning the title Sir Peter Fenris Bane from Aslan. But Peter's bravery and success don't mean that he feels no fear. On the contrary, when Peter first sees Fenris attacking Susan, he did not feel very brave indeed. He felt he was going to be sick, but that made no difference to what he had to do. So, Peter's bravery consists not in how he feels, but in how he acts. So, in spite of his fears, Peter pulls himself together and fights. Similarly, when Aslan leaves him in charge of the battle against the witch, Peter rises to the occasion. Although we learn that Peter feels uncomfortable about fighting the battle alone, and the news that Aslan might not be there and had come as a great shock to him, he still takes on the task and ends up fighting with the witch in hand-to-hand combat. So Peter seems to know instinctively how to be a warrior. As after receiving his sword from Father Christmas, he needs no training before slaying Fenris and fighting in the battle. He also instinctively begins to think like a military tactician. When Aslan leads his followers to the fords of Viruna, Peter suggests that they camp on the far side of the river to protect them from a night attack by the witch. So Aslan tells him this is unnecessary, but that all the same, it was all well thought of. That is how a soldier ought to think, he says. So now, at the end of the novel, he was found as the king of Cair Paragnil and got the title of Peter Gatchalian out. So to close it, when that came out of the wardrobe, kings it only says of they were just longer kings and queens Edmund and Narnia, but in their Peter, Susan, Tatian, and Lucy that they are old clothes in. So the shows shape they have regret not that to their lost child or not, but from that they have time, the wisdom, time, knowledge, and so from there also something in the critics Narnia argued this is all namely the thing that something is of metaphor, inspiration, that journey education often the cover acts go there and back again. In a circle, the characters will them and in knowledge, in experience, and able to gain also knowledge and new states development, but all perspectives unlike ages. So, and in summary, the essay demonstrates that their adventures in Narnia takes the traits of a psychological adventure journey and it represents form realization, logical repressed desires. The through of the realizations are that they develop as this character. They are now Lucy the Shaky and Fearful, so to Lucy the Valiant. By Edmund the Jerk, Edmund the Just, while Susan Edmund grown-up wanted to Susan the Just, and Peter the Self-Righteous to Peter the Magnificent. And that's all.